Look, the claims that have been made, I have not seen any conclusive evidence. What I can tell you is that we're certainly closing down all of the avenues that we know about. So, for example, I'm aware that certainly in the past, I don't know if it's continuing up to now, that there's a tendency to forge the signatures, myself, former finance minister Weston, and AG as well, who from time to time, whenever he's acting, would sign those duty waivers. So what we have done, we have introduced a new electronic form to eliminate that type of, you have to call it theft. I would have said manipulation, but it's really theft. And we have also about to introduce a policy that only the finance minister will be able to preside over any duty waiver. So even when I'm not on island, the acting prime minister will have no such authority. And the whole idea here is to centralize the process so that I'm taking full responsibility here. So if they want to speak to any issue of any corruption, well, deal with me. Now, the other issue too here is that by ensuring that other two taxes have to be paid, there's no opportunity for manipulation, because if you go to customs and you see that 100% waiver of RRC, the customs officers ought to know that in law.
Immediately.
It's not...
it's enshrined in law.
Exactly, that is not legitimate. So we're taking all the steps necessary to protect government's revenues. We are aware too, it has been brought to our attention that there's some businessmen in this country who are bringing in very expensive drinks, the Hennessy and so on, and even beers. And what they're doing is that they are misclassifying the goods that they're bringing. So, for example, they will classify them as hygiene products and pay 15% instead of 45%. So we are literally doing spot checks on these imports, or let's say more regular spot checks on those imports. In fact, for last Friday, there's a particular person who got caught, and he had to pay an additional 66,000 EC dollars, and there will be a fine of $25,000 too. And in the future, any goods that that person brings in will be subject to a thorough check. There will be no assumption of regularity. And we're even thinking too that we may have to even clothe individuals who are not necessarily let's say, routine customs officers as we know them, with the legal authority to help us to do spot checks. And that is to ensure that in the event there's any collusion, that we can also, spot those individuals who are robbing the revenue, or unearth those individuals who are robbing the revenue. We're also thinking about going to Parliament as well to make the fines more extensive too. Because $25,000 when you're stealing $100,000 worth of revenue, that's like a slap on the wrist. Maybe we may have to have a fine of the full value of the shipment in order to make sure that they stop this situation. So we are asking custom officers to be a little more vigilant, especially those responsible for compliance, and even the post-audit system as well. In fact, we'll be having a meeting with them to ask them to step up on their post-audit, and even to test the system to the extent that you can go into a store, for example, and maybe, let's say, buy a Hennessy. And if they're selling it for a particular price that is extremely low, significantly lower, let's say, than the supplier, then that in itself could be helpful in determining whether or not that person is robbing the revenue. Because if the legitimate supplier, the person who has the agency, is unable to, let's say, to compete, or if a person who is not a supplier is able to sell the product at a cheaper price, then something is wrong. Now, what we need to is the cooperation of the general public. They know these people who are literally robbing the revenue, to just give us some little tip-offs, and we will, without, let's say, the strictest confidence, address these issues. In fact, I can tell you one last week is a tip-off that we got, and we were able to act on it quickly. So I don't know why these people believe that they can be fast and loose with government's revenue. And we're very gung-ho about collecting government's revenues, because we just increased the ABSC by 2%, and whereas we expect to have a yield of an additional $40 million so that we can pay public servants The last thing we want is a situation in which we're not collecting the revenues because people are stealing it, and then we have to go back and increase taxes further. So we have no choice but to be vigilant and to ensure that the taxes are paid. And as I speak to the whole issue of paying salaries and wages from the increased taxes, I recognize our political opponents are trying to make a case that we clandestinely increase the pay for parliamentarians. Now, they weren't present during the budget debate, and clearly they didn't read the estimates because we'd have announced